Hello, greetings everyone. It is great to see all of you join us today for the first annual GRRSP Congress 2023 happening. My introductions are, I'm Dr. Faisal Nawaz, one of the co-founders as well as GRRSP faculty members who will be hosting this Congress for you, along with my co-organizers, Dr. Zara Arshad and Dr. Rahul Kashyap. It is our pleasure to have you with us and welcome once again. As a brief background to our work at GRRSP, which stands for the Global Remote Research Scholars Program. This is a global online program, which is a 6 months mentorship in research initiative, which has been running for quite some time with a focus and vision on promoting mentorship among students, among physicians, among researchers across different backgrounds, across different countries, all of them coming together and learning more through our 6 months training course. So that is our brief background, and we hope that you can check out our website as well, which is grrsp.com, as well as our YouTube and Twitter channels to learn more about our program and to apply as well if you're interested in starting your journey in research, or perhaps you're someone who is in the middle of your journey and trying to find more opportunities to lead your own research projects, to be empowered on a global scale. So that is what we have at GRRSP. And today, bringing us back to our Congress, I am very proud to see a very experienced panelists, as well as keynote speakers, and of course, our presenters from different corners of the world coming together for this Congress. We'll be talking a bit more about it in a bit, but we're very happy again to have you. And I'll be sharing my mic now to Dr. Zara Arshad, who will be giving you a bit of a background regarding the agenda for the day and what we have in store for you as part of this exciting event.
Thank you, Faisal. Hello, greetings and welcome to everybody to GRRSP's first ever annual Congress. We are very excited to have you all here, and we are also very appreciative of the fact that most of you are there under the exact time that we had given out. My name is Dr. Zara Arshad. I'm one of the faculty members with Global Remote Research Scholars Program and also one of the members of the organizing team for this Congress. I would like to take this short while to walk you through today's event. What are we going to be discussing over the course of the next some hours. On the screen, you'll be seeing the agenda of today's Congress. So we'll be starting with two keynote speakers by Dr. Amit Sood and Professor Subote, after which we'll be starting the first section of presentations, which is going to have around 9 presentations. Then we're going to have a short break. And after that, the second session, which will have around 10 presentations. Then we move on to our third keynote speech, and then we end today's event with awards and honors, and then the closing remarks. So without any further delay, we can move on to the first keynote speech of first annual Global Remote Research Scholars Congress. Our first keynote speech is by Dr. Amit Sood, who is the creator of the Resilient Option program. He was a professor of medicine and chair for student life and wellness at the Mayo Clinic. He's a published author, including the Mayo Clinic Guide, the Stress-Free Living, the Mayo Clinic Handbook for Happiness. He has presented at several impact forums, such as the TEDx, Lake Nola, Forbes Under 30 Forum. He has received numerous awards from the Mayo Clinic. We'd like you all to welcome Dr. Amit Sood.
Thank you so much for your generous introduction, and it's lovely to meet you all. It is truly my privilege to talk to you about resilience and well-being. And in the context of that, I will try to answer 7 specific questions that I asked myself as I was on this, or I have been on this journey as a resilience student. And hopefully I might share with you some research insights, some practice ideas, as well as, share some insights into how to build your, spark, if you will. I was recently talking to a physician colleague of mine, and I asked him, when was the last time you were completely relaxed, when you could shut off your phone and pager? And he said that was like 3 years ago. I was getting my colonoscopy. I was under propofol, and so I could turn off my pager. So you are all busy. I know how busy you are. And so how do we carve our little spark? And so that's what. So I had 7 questions. I do share them in a very linear format, but it has been anything but linear for my last 2 decades. So the first question I was asking was, when I started my career, was what's the big idea? So I looked at 3 big challenges our society was facing at that time. One was tobacco cessation, the other one was obesity, and third was excessive stress. And to me, big idea is, what is in my capacity, a bit like Ikigai, what can I impact the most, where I can touch the maximum number of people? Interesting study came from Harvard, where they looked at students and asked them about their top priority. This is about 10,000 students who were surveyed, and they asked whether caring is your top priority, happiness or success. And only 22% rated caring. But when you look at longitudinally, it's actually caring that leads to greatest happiness and success. People who were really focused on success didn't succeed, and people who were really focused on happiness became miserable. But people who really cared about caring were very successful. So and happy at the same time. So what I realized was I focused on stress because I thought that is where I can impact the most. And people really are sharing 3 loads or lifting 3 loads at this time. One is the cognitive load, and that is the number of user IDs and passwords you have to remember. That is the amount of change that is happening in the world, the number of choices you have. There's like 60 kinds of flosses to choose from. So it's just crazy, the amount of cognitive load. And I realized that the amount of load that our brain has to lift will exceed our brain's capacity at some point. So the second is emotional load. You all have to carry a smile, a professional look, but you may not be feeling well all the time. So there is the authentic self and there is a synthetic self, and you have to generate a very pleasant synthetic self all the time. And so that creates a lot of load. And the third is moral or spiritual load, because many times, we want to deliver compassion, but what we are asked to deliver is numbers. And that leads to a disconnect between institutional priorities and your priorities, and that leads to burnout. So any person who's getting these 3 loads, I mean, when you look at industrialization, the way it has progressed from phase 1 to phase 4, we have systematically reduced the physical load our backs have to carry, but we have increased the cognitive, emotional, and spiritual load that our brains have to carry. And this is not going away anytime soon. So I thought helping people lift their load better, maybe a good exercise, maybe a good lifetime mission. And let me know if you do not feel you have at least one of these loads excessive. I'll become your student of life, because I have not yet met any professional who did not share that they had excessive load. So then the second question I asked for myself was, which I'm also challenging you, once you have your why, your important question, important idea you wish to pursue, then the second question to ask is, how do I bring unique insights into it? So this is late 1990s, early 2000, and most of the models were CBT based. So I thought bringing neuroscience into picture might be a good idea, helping people understand why they're struggling, because there was a lot of shaming around depression and mental health issues. So why not validate people through science? So for example, a few ideas about the brain. When you're driving, your brain is not driving on a familiar road. It's doing all that. And your brain is not saying, why am I so wonderful? Why am I loved so much? That makes no sense. That's not what your brain is thinking at any time. So my colleagues wanted to see how the brain looks when you're resting. They thought the entire brain will shut down, but this is the resting scan of the human brain. This is dynamic connectivity of the brain. It shows that brain actually becomes even more active. So there's all these small networks in the brain that collaborate to create a big network, and these sort of seesaw between two modes. The first one is focused mode, and focused mode is when you're pulled into an experience. If you have a baby giraffe outside the window right now, your brain will be in focused mode. The best example of focused mode in my personal life is when my 5-year-old did what I like to call pee-pee dance at birthday dates, when she has had drank a lot of fruit juice and her legs are closed, and I'm like, honey, you have to go, but daddy, I don't have to go. So when doing a research study, you're doing pee-pee dance, your brain is in the focus mode. Your brain loves to be in this mode. But there is a second mode called the default mode. Default mode is mind wandering. Default mode is when you've read 4 lines and you say, what was I reading? That happens to us all the time. Or somebody has told you, you are not listening. Rahul, I'm sure you've been blamed at some point that you're not listening to what I'm saying, or you're really struggling to focus, or sometimes you arrive in front of the home, you have no idea how you arrived because you don't remember anything on the road. That's your default mode. I found through my training that kids or students who were most successful were not the ones who spent the most time studying. They were the ones who were most focused. If you're spending 20 hours reading in a day, but 18 of those hours you're distracted, it's not going to work. So there are actually these two modes. Our brain seesaws between these two modes. And when we spend too much time in our default mode, by virtue of maladaptive neuroplasticity, our brain gets stuck in that, and it predisposes to all kinds of mental health issues. And the second challenge, which is fatigue. So our brain experiences fatigue in about 60 to 90 minutes of time of sustained cognitive effort. And this has been transformative, this realization. We won't get into the biology of it because I have just 20 minutes to finish all this. So, but I'd love to talk to you about biology of this at some point. The idea is, if you started working at 8 a.m. and by 10 a.m. your brain is, by 10 a.m. your brain is absolutely tired. The question is, what is your brain hungry for? Oxygen, glucose, certainly some workout, but your brain is hungry for rest. Your brain needs to let go of planning and problem solving. And then your brain is also hungry for something very interesting that I realized a few years ago. I was seeing a patient at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I was really tired. My little one at that time was constipated for 5 days in a row. My wife sends me a text. It says she did it. We didn't have poop emojis at that time, but I knew what she meant. I was very happy. I had no fatigue. That afternoon, I experienced uplifting emotions. So our brain is hungry for uplifting emotions every 60 to 90 minutes. And this is very intentional. This is preemptive. This is proactive. You give yourself uplifting emotions before you get fatigued, not because once you realize you're tired, it's a little bit beyond the curve. You're behind the curve. And third is motivation. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Connecting with your why. So letting your why inspire you. I know that is a word that is used too often, but the word that is not used too often is rum. So our brain is hungry for rum all day long. And so, by the way, this is metaphoric rum. Please don't come to the work drunk. This is a different kind of rum our brain is hungry for. So once I realized that my brain needs a little sip of rum all day long, I started treating myself with that. So this is me in 2012, my energy level. And this is me now. I think I have more energy as I'm getting older. And my wife may not agree with that, but that's how I feel. And this is through strategic intake of rum. I proactively like to give myself uplifting emotions every so often, every 60 to 90 minutes. And that has really helped me not go down to 2% battery charge at the end of the day. Third brain challenge is fear. I don't know what draws your attention here. Is it the spider or the glass on the table? Perhaps the spider, but how many people die of spider bites? It's less than 5 or 10 in a year. Compare that to how many people are killed by donuts. So rationally, you go to a party, they've got a box of donuts, you've got 20 donuts staring at you, you should run away in fear because they try to kill you by feeding donuts. So, but your body says this is going to come handy fighting the next Neanderthal that can happen any moment. So let me eat it. So we've got some irrational fears, such as fear of failure, and we do not have some rational fears, such as, what will happen to me if I don't chase meaning? Don't run away from fear. Chase meaning. That's the goal. Every corporate executive, and I do a lot of work with very successful corporate executives, and when they fail, it is because they are running away from fear and they have forgotten their meaning. And this is not a cliche. So I realized that most Homo sapiens are struggling because of the evolutionary baggage our brain carries, which is related to the adaptations our ancestors had to make. And so most people are struggling not because they are weak, they're struggling because our brain it was designed for survival and safety, but we are seeking peace and happiness. And so we have to repurpose our brain and work on it to tweak it. So the third question I asked was, okay, so I'm helping people understand the problem, but this should be a Disney movie where we can actually be happily ever after. So I can't just leave everybody saying, okay, we're all miserable, thank you. We have to offer novel solutions. And one of the challenges I found with people was that, and this is with experts who would put in 10,000 hours, was that meditation was offered as one solution when I started, but I found most people struggling with it. I myself struggle with it. So I said, okay, what do I do? So I thought maybe we should make it shorter, a bit like candy, not a whole meal. So this is the first practice that is core of our program, and I would love for us to go through it. It is about 2 minutes long. Don't worry. I saw some of the managers of the program getting worried that I'll take you on a 30-minute meditation retreat. No, it's just 2 minutes long. So I invite you to close your eyes. And the idea basically is, instead of focusing on all the open files, we close our eyes and think about the good people in our life. So please close your eyes if you're assuming you're someplace safe. Imagine you're waking up in the morning. Try to recall the color of the floor where you woke up. Now think about the first person in your life who matters a lot to you. Recall that person's smiling face. And then send that person your silent gratitude for being in your life. Second person, and let this be someone who is on the Zoom call today, who's on the webinar today with us. Go back to the first memory of this person. And then send them your silent gratitude. Third person, and let this be a child in your life. Your own child, a nephew, a niece, a younger sibling. Look at their eyes and notice the color of their eyes. And then send them your silent gratitude. Go back in time and look at yourself when you were an 8-year-old or a happy moment in your childhood. Recall your hairstyle at that time. Then send a warm hello to your happy, innocent self. Think about someone who has passed away, who you loved. Give that person a virtual hug. and hold that hug for like 3 more seconds. And then send silent gratitude to them. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. So thank you. So this is a very simple practice. The idea is you are basically waking up with intentionality, focusing on what matters to you. And it is the core idea behind anything we are doing is to shift from being automatic to being intentional, and eventually, of course, intentionally grateful and kind. You're welcome to post on the chat who you thought you were grateful for, who is on the Zoom call today, but we won't pause at this point, but we will probably, I think, Faisal or Zara or Rahul will share later when it's not my time being counted. So one specific idea of this practice to keep it going is to, if you wake up in the morning, find yourself in the bathroom, when you see that note, put a note on your bathroom mirror, gratitude, then go back to bed and start over. So it becomes a practice, a habit. The second idea is, this is my brain when I am dealing with 50 worries in my head. Of late, I realized that I'm worrying because I'm not worrying, because I thought I have to constantly worry to keep my world afloat. This is how I want to be. When this is a creative moment, when all the brain areas are collaborating to create an experience. So what I thought was, I don't want worries to keep pinging into my working memory, which just takes away from my focus and my creativity. So what I recommend sometimes people to do is schedule worry time. Is to take out 5 or 10 minutes to worry about all the stuff that is not immediately solvable, right? And so, but when you're done, and if the same worry comes at 6 p.m., you tell yourself, oh, I have my scheduled worry time tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So one sort of cognitive logistical practice, one emotional practice I wanted to share with you. So these were some, and this actually has been tested in a couple of trials. And we've tested the entire program in over 30 clinical trials now. So we thought, okay, we will offer some novel ideas to people, because we most of the times when in Mayo Executive Health, we saw patients who had been to pretty much every leadership panel you can think about. And so we had to offer them something novel. The fourth question was, how do I generate trust or buy-in? And there we performed a number of clinical trials. This was our first study with my physician colleagues, and we found that the training in a randomized trial setting significantly improved pretty much every measure that we had included in the study. Now we have over about 35 clinical trials, and this is a summary of the data. And we've had so many groups that have contacted us from published studies. So yeah, so I thought, there's been several times when stress and well-being have come up in the last 100 years or so, but they have not succeeded because of lack of research. And so research was very important, and that has really helped us a lot. And we have maybe 5 or 6 more trials ongoing. So the next question, the fifth question, was, how do I make it cute and relatable? And for this not to be like 20-session therapy. So first of all, as you may have guessed, we add a lot of humor through the practice. So this is my younger daughter. She's 12 now. She'll be grossed out if I tell her that I showed her 4.5-year-old picture. But there's a little story about resilience here. So she made this starfish at daycare, and purple was her favorite color. And as we were driving home, the starfish broke. So I thought she's going to cry because she can't show it to her big sister. But looking at the starfish, she said, "Daddy, this was a starfish. Now it has become a sailboat." So to me, that was a resilient response, because there are times in life you will not succeed. So you have to find meaning in what is broken. Everybody says, I have failed many times, and just try to find meaning in, okay, there's something wrong in here, but maybe it is not as bad as it could be. I've personally seen 2 patients who are alive today because they missed their flight. They were very upset when they missed their flight, only to realize that it saved their life. And my 6th question was, okay, now I have some research data. How do I scale And I won't sell myself too much here, but what we did was to create a customized train the trainer program and resilient option online program, in-person 4-hour program, etc. We have 8 or 9 books. We have a lot of digital presence, a lot of partnerships with Fortune 50, Fortune 500, and universities, nonprofit, etc. So that has allowed us to scale, because alone you cannot do much. But clearly you have to create first the right kind of cheese for people to come and be interested. And my final question was, how do I stay true to my values? Because it's very easy to lose your values and start getting more into extrinsic kind of reward. Historically, intrinsic reward is what will make you successful and happy, but extrinsic reward is what we have been off late chasing. So our mission has clearly been to democratize mental health. We never refuse anyone because of cost of the program. If they cannot afford, we try our level best to share the program generously. So in that spirit, if you want, you can access the full lifetime course at resilientoption.com and using the coupon Resilient Option 100. That is the Resilience Masterclass, and you feel free to share it with anybody. If you want a copy of my book, just email me and I'll send you a PDF copy. Mailing it's just too much hassle. So PDF is easy, and you can forward it to anybody that you feel like. So these are the 7 questions I asked myself. What's the big idea? How do I bring unique insights? How do I offer novel solutions? How do I generate trust buy-in? How do I make it cute and relatable? How do I scale, and how do I stay true to my values? This is what has helped me move from a fairly unknown, initial medical training to being able to touch a few lives and be a student of resilience, and personally grow emotionally, socially, and spiritually. And all of you, I am convinced, and this is not just a bunch of platitude. All of you have a brain that is worthy of being a Nobel laureate. It is just a matter of if you can keep your milk in a cup instead of letting it spill. You keep your focus and put the right effort with the right intentions, and the magic will happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sood. I am truly grateful on behalf of all of us here. I can say that we've all felt the power of growing our resilience and mental health. And we couldn't have asked for a better start to this conference as well from someone like you who's sharing these experiences and the 7 gems of questions you've answered. I think more than what I can say, that the chat box in the conference is actually giving us a bit of a sneak peek into how grateful everyone has been. And it's amazing to see the power of pausing where you are. And when it comes to mentorship and research, all of it comes afterward, but we start within ourselves. We start to work on what we can and then grow that further. So we're very amazed by all the work you're doing, and hopefully more would actually be looking up your organization and work in terms of resilient building. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for all you're doing to help.
Absolutely. Our next keynote speech for today is by Professor Subodh Dev. And it has been a pleasure having Professor Subodh with us today, essentially because of the vast background that he brings into the sort of realm of mentorship. And just to sort of give a little bit of a brief background, Professor Subodh is the Dean of the Royal College of Psychiatrists and has led many initiatives, both in the United Kingdom as well as globally, in terms of mentorship, in terms of research, in medical education, and is creating a vast experience of impact and generations of people who would like to see international medical graduates as well as psychiatrists in the future as well, who would be benefiting from his mentorship. So Professor Subodh, over to you, and we're very grateful to welcome you to the first annual GRRSP Congress.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and really good to hear Dr. Amit Sood and his talk. It was very, very relevant in a way to what I'm going to say. Well, first of all, I wanted to start by thanking you, the organizers, to bring this platform, and just going to try and see if my slides are moving forward. Yeah, they are. Okay, and to thank all the participants. I think it's easy to forget, but we've just emerged from a pandemic which significantly changed the world, and the way we looked at it, and memories can fade very easily. And I think it's important that we kind of have some memory of where we're at with the pandemic. And I feel that it's a good time to examine the question that Dr. Sood posed for us. What's the big idea? What's my novel contribution? What are my values? And I think so. I want to start by thanking all of you, because you will be hopefully doing that. And so this is my advanced gratitude to everyone here. But my question, I really want to start with, what is research? And I mean, I'm sure most of you have already looked at this, and it kind of seems obvious that this is what research is, that we study something in detail, we look at try and generate new knowledge, new evidence, and then new concepts. And I think if you find, a medical textbook or an epidemiological textbook, there might be a mild variation in the definition. By and large, this is what the definition kind of comes down to. And I think where these definitions I feel fall short is in the next question, and for what purpose. And I think Dr. Sood touched upon that as well, as to the meaning of what is your own purpose, and then what is the meaning that you are striving to derive. And I feel that, well, I don't know how many people in the chat, in the audience today, are already involved in research, but I think when I look back at the medical research that I was involved in as a student or even as a trainee, I think I was probably, doing this with blinders on. I was focused on the project that I was involved in. The idea was, let me get a publication. I might have thought of what kind of impact factor am I aiming for, but the bigger picture was missing. And I think thinking about, well, what is the purpose of your research? What do you really want to achieve? What is the big idea there? What are the big goals that you want to kind of shift, and what is the big change that you envisage? And I think that is something that is really important. I think I'm not saying that everybody will arrive at that in one flash, but at least striving to look for it is absolutely important. You want to kind of see what is the big picture, and how does my little small cog build up to that. And I think that is very, very important. I think, sadly, I feel that a lot of the research that takes place in the world today doesn't have that connection. For me, I think the big purpose was and has been around. So I did my early research in molecular genetics, studying depression. And I think that was an eye-opener for me, because as I was looking at molecular genetics, we were looking at new human genome had just been mapped. So it was an exciting time to kind of do association studies and the like. But I think what was really eye-opening to me was let me understand, well, what are the links between the psychosocial world and the biological world? And that was the big question. Well, how do we all kind of, as human beings, we don't need complex experiments to know that the psychological world and the social world influences you. You might watch something on television, you might watch something happening thousands of miles away live on television. You might receive a phone call from your friends or family or your loved one, and you can feel some biological change within you. So we don't need complex experiments to know that happens. But what does that mean for illness models? What does that mean for particular disorders? Was the area that I was interested in. I think, and in some ways, I think this idea had been there in me. This is Grant Medical College, which is where I started my journey as a medical student. I'm very grateful to the institution, one of the oldest medical schools in Asia and in the world. However, I mean, to those of you who are from that part of the world will know that clinics or the way the clinical world works in places like India is very different to the way it works in places like the UK, where I work now. I think here, on a very busy day, I might see 5 or 6 or 7 new cases throughout the whole day. There, in the morning, you would see 7 new cases, 8 new cases, and then you would have 50 follow-up patients. And then you have to go and clock all the new admissions in. And that was your day. And then you were on call at night. And so the morning when I would start my clinic at 7 in the morning, people would come milling around, 7 or 8 in the morning, people would come milling around from that time until the last person was seen at about 2 p.m. And all the time while I was there, not once, I thought of myself as a very conscientious doctor, someone who really cared for my patients, and others did too. I mean, they all kind of said that to me. But not once did I think, or did anyone else in my department think, that why don't we have a system where people can come in, register the name, go and have a cup of coffee, and just not have to wait around, hanging around, waiting to be seen. And I think the idea that your science is only as good as it makes a difference to your patient seems very trite, seems very obvious, but it's easily forgotten. And I think that was a lesson learned for me. And I think if there's one single message I want people to take away from this today, it is that, I think be aware that ultimately we are doctors, we are healers, and I think the phrase healer is not really in vogue now, it's not trendy, but that's what we are in the job for. I think so, whichever, even if you're doing basic research like I was doing, which is molecular genetics research, you have to have that aim in mind that ultimately I want to make things better for people. And I think that can be easily forgotten. So I think remembering that is important. I think, and one good way of doing that, and which is where I took my direction later, is I switched to medical education because I was dissatisfied with the way, and I still am, with the way medical education is taught. I think I'll come to that in a minute. And I think that medical education is kind of teaches us to not have that bigger picture, I think, and partly I think it comes because we don't really have the involvement of patients in our medical education. And so my master's topic in medical education was around experiential learning. And what we did was we developed and I guess which is where my unique work has been. I think we have the largest bank of expert patients who are involved in teaching medical students. So we have 50 faculty members, 5 paid faculty members who are all patients basically from my service, and then they are involved in teaching medical students. And I think that's a very powerful model to have learn from somebody who has real experience of illness. So I would say that that's something do bear in mind, that when we talk about mentoring and we think of people who are in the same field, we don't often think about learning from your patients and carers. And I think they are a great source of learning. And I would say that don't discount them. In fact, seek them out and try and see what you can learn from your patients. And then you'll be surprised how much you'll actually learn from your patients. And the real questions come from them, right? Because we often learn from people who have no experience of the real world. I mean, talking of IBS, I don't know if any of you are involved in irritable bowel syndrome research, but I think, for years and years and years, you would have been taught in a particular way about IBS, and I think surgery is often seen as a mainstream option. Same thing with spinal surgery, and I think it's now that you kind of start seeing colorectal surgeons and spinal surgeons questioning that, well, do we really need to be doing so much surgery in this patient? And are there other models that we should be looking at? And if you talk to patients, they would have told you a lot of those things way before the modern evidence was developed. So I feel that, when you talk of research, it's all about applying, studying evidence at population levels and then applying it to individuals. Not all of it is like that, but a lot of it is like that, especially in the clinical world. And I think that's one of the things where I think we have failed as a bunch of medics, I think as a bunch of scientists, clinical scientists. I think, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this number 17. Does it ring bells for anyone? I can't see the chat, but if the number 17 as a researcher, clinical medical researcher, doesn't ring bells for you, I think I would say make sure this number is imprinted on your mind, because this is the median length between when an evidence becomes established, well accepted by your peers, and the time it gets translated into practice. Now that is a shocking gap, there's a shocking gap. I mean, would you want this for your family members, when you know that what is the latest evidence, and yet they're getting treatment, which is more than a decade old, but that is the reality of medicine today. And I think we often forget that medicine is not a single person endeavor. A medicine is a system. And I think embedding things in systems takes time, it takes effort. And we need people who can translate evidence to practice. And I think we need specialists in that. And I think that's where the real gap has been. I think for years and years, I think we're now moving to open access models, but I think for years and years, knowledge was kind of preserved as belonging to a certain coterie of people who resided in ivory towers. I think now there's more democratic access, but even then, I think we're still lagging behind in implementing that evidence to practice. And I think thinking about that is quite important. And so for me, I think this whole idea that how do we see, so in my role as a dean of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, my endeavor is to really bring about a cultural shift in medical education itself. And the problem that I'm trying to address is illustrated by good medical practice in the UK. Now, those of you are familiar with General Medical Council, that's the regulatory body in the UK. We have regulatory bodies across the world. Every jurisdiction has one. And then pretty much you can pick up the Bible of your jurisdiction and you'll find that it reads a bit like good medical practice, a bit like the Hippocratic Oath does, for all of us. And the issue with all of that, all of those professional guidelines are that they are very much about the doctor-patient relationship. Now, that sounds fine. That's what it should be about. It should be about the doctor-patient relationship. I think the problem is that that's how medicine is taught. The model is that if something's wrong with your liver, let me ask you questions about your liver, let me palpate your liver, let me scan your liver, let me then investigate your liver, and then I will prescribe you something for your liver. The idea that what does that mean for my catchment area, it just doesn't come in. I think another example would be that if you are an ED medic and you're getting patients with gunshot wounds, then you say, well, I need surgeons who know how to repair gunshot wounds, and that's, as a medical doctor, that's what you're thinking. And then if the number of people with stab wounds and gunshot wounds increase, then you say, I need more surgeons with that specialist skill. But then who's going to actually think about why are we getting all these people with gunshot wounds in the first place? And I think that kind of thinking just doesn't exist in medicine. And I think we really haven't. And I chose that example because that's exactly the change that we are seeing now. I think Casa Permanente in the US has just invested £2 million to try and look at how do we start looking at why do we get so many people with gunshot wounds in ED in the first place? What can we do in our local communities to reduce the number of gunshot wounds occurring in the first place? And I think the reason why I bring that up is to say that, well, I think we have to start thinking of ourselves as clinicians who are responsible for the care, not just of our individual patients, but also of the communities that we practice in. And I think that knowing your community, that knowing that your research has relevance to your community is important. And I think a lot of you, I'm surmising, I mean, I am an international medical graduate myself, as you mentioned that. I think a lot of you might be international medical graduates yourself, and all of us want to be globally competent. But wherever you work, you also want to be locally relevant and locally invested. And I think that's something you shouldn't forget. So you might move to Pennsylvania, you might move to Australia, you might move to inner part of India or Pakistan. You need to be able to apply your knowledge to the local area. And I think this is something that's missing. I think when I set up the postgraduate training program in Zambia, I was astonished. The curriculum of the Zambian medical school at the University Teaching Hospital in Lusaka read exactly like the curriculum at Bellevue Kaplan in New York. Now, on the one hand, you might think that that's how it should be, that, medics across the world should be learning exactly the same thing. But on the other hand, you can easily see the absolute absurdity in that, right? That, you are trying to apply the systems that are available in New York and the kind of, resources available there to a place like Zambia. It just does not work. And I feel that medical schools have failed abysmally, in my opinion, in adapting themselves to the local needs. And I would say that that would be my message to all of you as researchers, to think about, well, how do you make yourself and your research locally relevant? And I think if you're thinking about that, health inequalities is a great lens, because, if you are designing a system, the way to test your system is to test it at its weakest link. And we all know that health inequalities do occur in our societies and communities. And I think if you're thinking that the link is snapping each time, every time at a particular point, so there are sections of our society who are not doing very well, that means your overall health output is not good enough, And so I think I've talked about health inequalities, but workforce inequalities come into play as well. And I think a lot of my work has been around workforce inequalities, thinking about why do international medical graduates not do as well as they do in their home countries when they move to countries like UK, US, Australia. And I think the reasons are quite simple. It is really about how much are you able to acculturate yourself, how much are you able to acclimatize yourself to the new system, and what level of induction and support do you have. And so I would say that asking for that support is something that we all must be become good at. I think because a lot of times you move and you want to not appear different, you want to be like everybody else, and so you don't ask for support. But I think the same would apply for people moving from here to Zambia or from here to India. I would say that we're exactly the same thing. If you're going to a new system, you will not acculturate straight away. You will need that support and induction. So ask for that support. And I think my research kind of shows that that is one of the predictors of success and a narrowing of attainment gaps. I think the evidence around psychosocial determinants of health and indeed of workforce, well-being is been around for 2 decades. We've known, for example, this slide shows that if you have more than 4 adverse childhood experiences, your health outcomes on a range of issues from cardiovascular illnesses to cancers to mental illnesses is 2 to 10 times worse. We've known that. And yet, I find that research is kind of often thought of as a very narrow field, and I don't think we take into account the interdisciplinary research. And so I would say that go out, whatever your project is, try and broaden your horizons. Going into depth is important, but also broadening your depth, broadening your range is important too. So connect with health economists, connect with sociologists, connect with AI and digital technicians, connect with people, and then try and see anthropologists. And I think you feel that the impact of your research is going to be much more broad when you do that. I think widening participation is important. One of the reasons why we've not been able to actually, our medical research has been dominated by biomedical and has not taken into account, even when robust evidence has been built up around psychosocial sciences, is because of the slide. Just to illustrate that point, I think, if any of you were to prescribe 5 times the dose of an antidepressant or lithium, you would be, it would be a disciplinary matter. And yet, I think a lot of us as medics discharge people into environments that we know are toxic for them. We forget to ask about domestic abuse. We forget to inquire about people's housing. And we think that that's fine, that that's not. Yet when the evidence is so strong that domestic violence can significantly exacerbate illnesses, can significantly cause relapses in a range of illnesses, can significantly worsen health outcomes, and obviously shorten one's lifespan. All of this, I think, this failure to kind of look at the picture comes partly because we have had a very monochromatic and a monocultural workforce. I think if you look at this slide, it shows figures for the UK that most of our doctors, 80% of our doctors, come from the high socioeconomic class. Now, that is actually true across the world. If anything, it's much worse in other parts of the world. And I think this is a problem. We need doctors from all strata of society. And I think if we don't have that's really going to cause problems in the diversity of thought we have in our research. And I think the research agenda, I feel, has been, again, kind of one track, partly because of that. So if you are able to try and pull in a diverse team, I think having diversity in your research team is really important. Having diverse skills is important. Now, I feel that a lot of people kind of say this, we're already doing this, and that's one of the biggest barriers I have. People say, well, of course we are thinking about diversity. Of course we're thinking about biopsychosocial. We are, thinking about the planet, and we're thinking of sustainable. Well, are you? And I think we need to be a bit more, we need to dig deeper to check whether that's actually happening. And I think the evidence shows that it does not happen. And I think presenting evidence is important. I think the other big barrier is the attitudinal barrier. We have this fear that if we somehow don't use jargon, don't use kind of sophisticated language, and don't use medical words and jargon terms, we'll somehow become social workers, or it's all too political. Well, here's my take. Making choices is being political. If you are making a choice of any kind, if you're choosing milkshake over coffee, you're making a political choice. And I think it's the same here. I think, Virchow said this, and I totally agree that the medicine is interwoven with politics, I think, and you can't really escape that. So I think we need to decide that, well, what do you really want? If you want to improve the life outcomes of your patient, that's a political choice. And that means that, you go out and study all the factors, all the variables that might actually impact on your patient outcomes. And so I think to understand whether we feel comfortable with the politics is, I ask people this, well, if you're worried about being too political, are you actually feeling comfortable then working in a system of clinical practice, of research, where over the last 100 years, 200 years, whatever span you want to take, from 1910, when the new medical schools started and the new research program started, ethnic minority patients across the world have had poorer health outcomes. When I was involved in molecular genetics, that's not that long ago, we excluded non-white people from the research because we said, well, that will change the gene pool. So we need to just look at only white people. Do you really feel comfortable working in a world like that? Do you feel comfortable in a world where women consistently have poorer career outcomes in academic medicine? You have people from ethnic minorities, poorer backgrounds, consistently have, poorer career aspirations and career choices. Well, I hope that most of us don't feel comfortable working in that environment. And that's where I think mentoring comes in. I haven't spent a long time talking about mentoring, but I would have thought it's a fairly obvious thing to say. But I think there is evidence to show that when you ask people, your success is determined by who supports you early on in life. And so getting a mentor very early on in life, I think, is quite important. I was blessed to have, some very, very good mentors through my career. And I think I really saw a big change when my mentor moved from mentoring to sponsoring me. And I think it's sponsoring, I'll come to that a bit later, but I think it's really about taking ownership of your career aspirations and then helping you and supporting you, not just by guiding you and coaching you, not just by kind of laying down a map for you, not just by saying that, well, this is the map you might want to follow and discussing the pros and cons of 2 or 3 different kinds of routes, but actually sponsoring you actively by saying that, well, I'm going to be talking about you in my circles. I'm going to be talking about you in my networks, and I'm going to find opportunities for you. And I would say that if you are in a position to sponsor, do that, because that's the quickest and the most powerful way of actually making change and addressing some of those inequalities that I've talked about. And then you remember that, your comfort zone might not allow that to happen. We all tend to gravitate. I think all of you would see that in a room full of people, that you gravitate towards your own, right? You don't go on and chat up people who look very different to you, I think, or are very different color to you. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of. And the responsibility is partly on us, and the onus is partly on us, especially when you are an international medical graduate. But I think the same kind of thing applies elsewhere too. How do you actually overcome that awkwardness that you have within yourself to try and broaden that horizon, broaden that range that we talked about? So I think that's something I would really recommend. And I think, we all know that things like diversity and equality are not achieved by going to a mandatory training course or, going to a leadership class that tells you about how to achieve diversity and equality. It comes by intergroup contact. So make contacts with people from a wider group. I think certainly in the UK context, I tell my IMGs to go and study, do revision with local white trainees. I say, well, go and study with them. Don't form your study group where you're studying only with international medical graduates. Not because it just kind of, gets them to earns them social capital, which I think it does, you build social capital locally, which is very important, but also because we know that academic success is better when they have studied with white candidates. So there's evidence to show that that's what works. So I think, as I explained, coaching, I'm a runner, I run marathons, and, I'm a member of running club, and my coach kind of does running plans for me, and then if I have an injury, we kind of work out the issues and we think about how do we tailor my training plan to things. But I think it's a mentor who advises and guides you. And I think, like I said, I think, to give you an example, I was running, I've only done one ultra marathon in my life. I stick to the marathon distance, which is 26.2 miles, 42.2 kilometers. I did one ultra marathon, which was in Ladakh, which is up in the Himalayas. And I chose that because it's the world's highest ultra marathon. And the world's highest ultra marathon, it starts at 13,500 feet in Leh village, and then you're climbing up to Khardungla Pass, which is one of the world's highest motorable passes. It's at almost 18,000 feet, and then you're coming down to Leh, and obviously oxygen is very, very low from the start, so you are running in a very, very oxygen deprived scenario. So I had to climb a mountain just taller than Kilimanjaro. I had to climb a mountain, Stoke Kangri, which is 20,000 feet, to just acclimatize. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want to even turn up. Climbing the mountain, Stoke Kangri, just a day before my race was on, exhausted me physically and emotionally. And I didn't even want to turn up to the starting point. And I think that's where a good mentor comes in. I think my mentor said, well, it doesn't matter what happens in the race. Turning up at the starting point is important. I think that's where I want to leave you all with that, Life is challenging. Life is full of ups and downs, and there will be some good days, some bad days. Some days your patients will achieve what you want them to achieve. Some days they won't. Some days your research results will fall in line with you want them to fall. Other days they won't. Someday you'll get a rejection notice from your journal. Other days, you get some negative review points. In all of that, remember that turning up at the starting point is important. I think what happens on the journey will happen on the journey. And in my journey, they said that it never rains once you're above the cloud line. It never rains. Swords law. It was raining. It was pouring. Within an hour, I was soaked completely. And thanks to the Indian military, they stepped in. I was able to take my clothes off, wring them dry. They gave me a cup of tea, and then I put those soaked clothes back on, and then ran up, and I finished the race. Look, in a pretty good time. But I think it might not have happened. I might not have finished the race. But I think turning up the starting point was good. I think it's important that we turn up, and then things will happen. You never know. I think turning up is really important. So I'll end there. Feel free to get in touch with me. I think turning those ideas into action requires that determination, requires that passion, persistence, and purpose. But above all, purpose. So do find that purpose. Do look for that purpose that will drive your research. So thank you, and I'll stop sharing the screen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Subodh, for such an enlightening talk. Thank you for expanding on your experiences on how mentors can be a significant part of the life of their mentees. You've also expanded on health inequities and the gaps in the medical education. I would like to take this opportunity to thank both of our keynote speakers, Dr. Subodh Dev and Dr. Amit Sood, for their time. We'd like to move forward with the presentations ahead. We have in the first sections 9 presentations, and for all the presenters that are here, let me walk you through some basic rules. I will be sharing the screen. You will be presenting in the background. You know the 5-minute sharp rule. You will be presenting for 5 minutes and we'll be taking the questions for 1 minute if there are any questions. The first presenter in line is Ramsha, and I'm just bringing their presentation up on screen. Do you see my screen, Ramsha? Please do confirm as you speak.
Yeah,
All good. Over to you.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Ramsha Janam Malik. I'm a graduate of Shifa College of Medicine, Islamabad, Pakistan. Title of my presentation today is Incidence and Outcomes of Pregnancy and COVID-19 at a tertiary care hospital in Pakistan. Next slide, please. So as we all know, COVID-19 is a respiratory tract infection, which is caused by SARS-CoV-2 virus. Why we studied it on pregnant women is because pregnancy is a vulnerable state, and pregnant population is a population that needs special care. And if they get infected with COVID-19, they have a higher risk of adverse effects proven with the previous literatures. Can you please move to the next points? For example, premature rupture of membranes, preterm labor, fetal growth restriction, fetal or neonatal death, and many more. The objective of my study was we have to observe the presentation of pregnant patients with COVID-19. We would follow the mode of their deliveries, whether it was vaginal delivery or it was a cesarean section, and the outcome of the pregnancy to see the mother and the baby, and follow with the COVID PCR test. Next slide, please. So it was a prospective observational study conducted at a tertiary care center in Pakistan for over a period of 8 months in the year 2020, from April to November. We screened all the patients, pregnant patients, for COVID-19 with PCR test, and we observed for the duration of their labor and delivery. All the delivered babies were observed for APGAR scores along with RT-PCR test, and we generated results using the SPSS software. Can you please move to the next slide? So we had a total of 1,269 pregnant patients who presented to our tertiary care center. Among those patients, 71 patients were found positive for the COVID on the PCR test. Talking about the presentations of COVID-19, 7% of them had the typical symptoms, which include fever, flu, dry cough, dyspnea, etc. Remaining were asymptomatic. The mean gestational age was 35.87 weeks. We saw the comorbid conditions. 52% had none of the comorbid conditions. 15% patients developed gestational diabetes mellitus. 6% patient develops pregnancy-induced hypertension during the course of pregnancy, and 27% already had the previously diagnosed diabetes, chronic illnesses like liver disease or some kidney disease. 55.9% patients underwent cesarean sections for the reasons which were not related to the COVID status. Can you move to the next slide, please? So these were the reasons that is displayed in the graph. 31% patient underwent cesarean section due to fetal distress. 22.9% underwent due to elective cesarean, and 38% due to the previous scar they had. So the 71 pregnancies that were COVID positive, we tested 37 babies out of them with RT-PCR, and they were found to be negative. We also observed ABGAR scores for the babies, which were recorded at the first minute and then at the 5th minute of the life. So they were normal, 7.5 at the first minute and then 8.8 at the 5th minute of their life. So next slide, please. So the aim of our study was that we wanted to see the pregnant patients, their presentation. Our study found that most of them were asymptomatic and they had uncomplicated pregnancies and deliveries. None of the interventions were performed because of the COVID status. We just observed them. And the delivered babies were kept with the mothers following the protocols, the PPE protocols. And then the babies were also found to be COVID negative. None of our pregnant patients moved to the intensive care unit. However, 6 babies went to the neonatal intensive care unit, but that was not related to the COVID status. We did, among those 6 babies, 5 babies underwent PCR again, and they were also negative. So our study proved that there is no vertical or breast milk transmission of the virus. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ramsha. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So, hi, thanks, Ramsa, for your excellent presentation. So I have a question that did you compare between 2 groups for the maternal outcomes between COVID-19 patients, like those who had COVID-19 and those who didn't have the COVID-19?
I'm sorry, but you are not really audible. I can't understand what your question is.
So I'm sorry. So basically, did you compare between 2 groups, those who had the COVID-19 positive and those who didn't had a COVID-19 positivity in terms of their pregnancy outcome?
So let me repeat, you wanted to ask me, did we make 2 groups, COVID positive and COVID negative?
Yeah.
And then we compared them.
So
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yeah, we did make 2 groups among the period of 8 months. All the patients were involved. We actively studied the positive patient, but we compared them with the negative, COVID negative. That's why we were able to conclude the results that we didn't need any intervention because of the COVID status of the COVID positive patients.
Okay. In the conclusion, you said that there was no, it included that there was no breast milk vertical transmission. So did you, how can you conclude? Because you didn't follow up the patients for the duration of the COVID positivity, and did you compare that with the period of, I mean, how long the mother was positive for COVID-19, and for how long the patient, I mean, the fetus, I mean, the neonate was taking the breast milk. So how can you conclude based on, because you have taken a sample maybe for one time. It may happen that later on the patient may have the child may have diagnosed with the COVID-19. So can you conclude that based on this study?
So let me repeat, you want to know how we concluded that breast milk transmission was also not possible. How did we follow up with that? So yeah, in our tertiary care center, according to the hospital's protocol, patients are followed postnatally and postpartum for up to 6 weeks. So on those gradual visits, we would always inquire and we would always ask for the baby's well-being as well. And we would ask for the if mother noticed any specific features or any specific symptoms in the baby. So this, like, we didn't do any active intervention like some cord blood test or some other blood tests, but we were able to do this with observation because of the limited resources. Yeah.
How many times we collected data? It was longitudinal follow-up, or you just taken the data one time at a time?
For the pregnancy, we followed it for the complete until delivery and then till 6 weeks postpartum.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
There's a question in the chat, Ramsha, which says that did you consider the past?
For like the last 3 months, if she was positive or not, but not before that.
All right. Thank you very much, Ramsha.
You're welcome.
Our next presenter is Shima Al-Maghan Muhammad. Shima, do you see my screen?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I can see.
All good.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you good.
Hello, everyone. It is me, my pleasure to be a part of this Congress. My name is Shima Al-Gham Muhammad Musa. I'm a medical student in Al University in Sudan, and I am in the 5th level. So let's talk about my research, the correlation between chronotype and sleep hygiene mediated by psychological distress among Sudanese adults in Sudan 2022. Next slide. So circadian rhythms are regulated by genetic and environmental components. The association of intrinsic and extrinsic factors modulated physical and individual sleep schedule, sleep hygiene, and even different chronotypes. Studies suggest that people with early morning chronotype, early morning, have less being psychologically distressed, and they assume also people with late or morning sleep chronotype have likely to have psychologically distress. So chronotype reflecting inter-individual difference in daily activity patterns and sleep awake cycle is intrinsically connected with well-being and mental health as well. So we can jump to the next slide. So what is the objective of this study? The objective of this study to assess the relation between these 3 variables: psychological distress and sleep hygiene and chronotype. We use mediation analysis to assess this relation. So let's talk about methods. Cross-sectional study design. This is a cross-sectional study design among medical students of Nile. No, you jump to the next slide. Go to the method slide. Yeah, thanks. This is a cross-sectional. No, I don't know why. Yeah. This is a cross-sectional study design among medical students of Al Nilan University in Khartoum State, using self-administrated questionnaire based on morning-evening questionnaires. Require 18 items. It's used to screen type of chronotype. And Kessler-Ter items used to assess psychological distress, and sleep hygiene index was used to screen sleep hygiene behavior. The participants were adult medical students from all academic levels. We use a systemic random sampling technique to select students. We obtained records of each batch from registrar's office, and we systematically sampled the second name of each batch records. We sampled the first name randomly using web-based randomization, and also we use mediation analysis to know the reflections of these 3 variables, and we use SPSS version 24, 26, to analyze these data. You can jump to the result section. Yeah. Among 303 medical students who complete the study questionnaire, 67.3% were females, and we found neutral sleep chronotype representing more than half of population. This is about 58.1%, followed by moderate morning, 26.7%, and moderate evening, 10.6%. Definite morning was 2%, and definite evening was 2.6%. So we found also 89.8% of our population had psychologically distressed. It is distributed from severe psychological distress, moderate psychological distress, and mild psychological distress. Also, we found there is a strong statistical significant relation between sleep hygiene and psychological distress. We found that people or students with good sleep hygiene also have good mental health, and the psychological distress score is less, and they are well mentally. The p-value of this, we found the p-value is less than 0.041. Actually, it is 0.000. Okay, you can jump to the next slide. Result slide, last result slide. Okay, students who are severely psychologically stressed were mostly to have normal sleep hygiene. The mean of sleep hygiene was 29.34. Also, there is a statistical association with psychological distress and self-rating health. Students with good health were psychologically well. The p-value less than 0.001. Later time sleeping have been associated with severe psychological disorders also. By using mediation analysis, we found there is indirect relation between chronotype and sleep hygiene and psychological distress. Sleep chronotype affect sleep hygiene, and sleep hygiene affect psychological distress. There is no direct effect between sleep chronotype and sleep hygiene. We found this by using a new technique of the data analysis called mediation analysis. So the conclusion of this study, there was a strong relation between psychological distress chronotype and sleep hygiene. This relation is also seen to be affected by age, gender, and BMI, and self-related health of each individual. Next slide. So I conclude my presentations, and thank you all for listening. This is my email and the number for more contact. If there are any questions.
Yeah, I have some questions. So basically, what did you check in the psychological distress? What kind of psychological disorders did you check in this study?
Yeah, I used Kessler 10 items. It assesses anxiety and depression disorders, and it break it to 4 categories: people who were well-being, and people who have psychologically distress, and people severe psychological distress, and moderate psychological distress, and even mild psychological distress.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another question was, I mean, I didn't understand this chronotype, and also, what did you mean by this moderate morning and definite morning? Those terminologies were a little bit. I'm not quite aware of those terms. So can you clarify a little bit quickly? You can respond in the chat also.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see it. Okay. Yeah, your questions, what do you mean by definite morning?
Yeah, definitive and moderate morning, and also chronotype.
Okay, so chronotype is an environmental and behavior, intrinsic and intrinsic factors that affect your pattern. This we call step hygiene. So what we mean by chronotype? Chronotype is a predisposing to people, or we can simply say people know their sleep pattern, early morning or it's evening, the right time they go to sleep. It's called chronotype.
Okay. Yeah. And what did you mean by this moderate morning and definite morning?
Yeah, I will explain it. So what we mean by it, the chronotype is distributed to 5 categories, which
Okay.
I mentioned it. The definite morning, the people is sleep in the time of 7 a.m. and the definitive evening, it is about 10 p.m. The time
Okay.
between them distributed to mornings and evening, and mix of them. So the
Okay.
definitive morning, you understand me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shima.
All the best.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all the presenters that you'll have 5 minutes to speak. And there's a pinned video of Dr. Kashyap that you're going to see. There's going to be a screen behind him that changes the color as the time passes. If the screen is on the red, that means you're almost by the end of the time of your presentation, right? The next presentation is Batul Nusrat. Batul, are you here? And can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Over to you.
Okay, hello everyone. I am Dr. Batul Nusrat from Pakistan. It is a pleasure to be speaking in front of all of you today. Today, I will be presenting my original research on the effects of COVID-19 lockdown on the mental health of Karachi's population. Next slide, please. Thank you. Since the first reported case in 2019, coronavirus has spread around the globe. Since then, 764 million people have been affected by COVID-19 around the world. In May 2020, when this research was conducted, there were around 40,000 cases and 873 deaths in Pakistan. Psychiatric disorders place a significant burden on the healthcare system, depression and anxiety being the most common ones, with an 80% prevalence in low to middle income countries. Given the repercussions of the COVID-19 lockdown, including limited social interactions, lack of de-stressing activities, and sedentary lifestyle, the rise in the mental health disorders is a valid concern. Next slide, please. Given this potential exacerbation of the psychiatric conditions, we conducted a cross-sectional survey via an online questionnaire that assessed the psychological health of Karachi's population. And this was disseminated during the first lockdown beginning February 2020. Our target population were permanent residents of Karachi, and our sample size was 443. The survey comprised of the DASH-21 scale, which is the depression, anxiety, and stress scale. And it was used to determine the extent of stress, depression, and anxiety. This scale consisted of 21 questions, which were answered using a 7-point Likert scale. We used SPSS to analyze our data. The independent t-test and one-way ANOVA were used to assess the difference in the mean scores of depression, anxiety, and stress. frequency and percentages. Next slide, please. Frequency and percentages were calculated for categorical variables, and a p-value of less than 0.05 was considered significant. Next slide, please. Out of the 443 participants, 76% were females and 24% were males, with a mean age of 23 years. A significant difference in depression levels was found between males and females, with 83% of females suffering from severe depression compared to only 17% of males. A, a greater proportion of those who had comorbidities or family history of any clinical illness suffered from severe depression compared to those who does not. Next slide, please. Adolescents had increased anxiety levels as compared to other age groups. Furthermore, those from low socioeconomic backgrounds also had increased levels of anxiety. Can I have on the next slide? As shown in the figure, 44% of the study cohort had moderate depression, while 35% had severe anxiety, and half of the population had normal stress levels. Next slide, please. To summarize, depression and anxiety levels increased among the general population, likely due to the uncertain circumstances. In 2020, coronavirus was unprecedented and mandated extensive research from the scientific community to understand its origin and impact. This research was a step forward in the right direction by allowing us to assess the mental health of residents in a low socioeconomic country. Since 2020, we have seen a rise in mental health conditions, given that psychiatric conditions are often chronic or subchronic and lasts many years. This emphasizes the importance of implementing widespread psychiatric care even 3 years after this research was conducted. Next slide, please. Thank you. That is all. If anyone has any further questions, you can contact me on this email.
Hi, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. I just have one question. What would you consider as one of the major challenges or the major challenge that you came across when you conducted this cross-sectional study?
One of the main challenges was actually getting participants to answer the questionnaire. As you know, that anxiety and depression levels were extremely high when the first COVID-19 lockdown hit. So people were actually apprehensive about giving this information out. So yeah, that was the biggest challenge.
Thank you, Batul. Do we have any other questions? All right, so moving on to the next presentation. Next presentation is by Zainab Mohammed. Zainab, can you see my screen? Zainab, do we have you here? Okay, we have you here. All right. We can't hear you. You were mute. Can you say something, Zainab? Still can't hear you. Okay, no worries, Zainab. We can move on to the next presentation and then we can come back to you. Does that sound fine? All right. Okay. Okay, so our next presentation is by Akanksha. Akanksha, do we have you here?
Yes.
And do you see my screen?
I cannot see my presentation. Yes, I do. Thank you.
Over to you.
Hello, everyone. I am Akanksha Singh, and the topic for my presentation is going to be sexual dysfunction in drug-naive females with first depressive episode, a cross-sectional study of prevalence. Next slide, please. So depression is a prevalent psychiatric disorder which causes a significant biopsychosocial dysfunction. And sexual dysfunction can be a common finding as early as in depression with first episode itself. So we all know that Master and Johnson, they revolutionized by giving us the 4 stages of sexual response. And as being from India, it's difficult to talk about sexual dysfunction, and thus it remains underreported and underdiagnosed. Next slide, please. So we conducted a cross-sectional descriptive study, and the study was for 12 months from June 2020 to May 2021. We included female patients presenting with first depressive episode and had no exposure to any psychotropics before. So we calculated our sample size using SPSS software. The inclusion criteria for our study was any patient who is willing to participate and consented, female between 18 to 45 years and diagnosed with first depressive episode according to ICD-10, and also patients who were sexually active or were in a long-term relationship. The assessment tools that we used was a semi-structured demographic proforma, Hamilton Depression Rating Scale, Arizona Sexual Experiences Scale, and Female Sexual Functioning Index. Next slide, please. So the results were very interesting. The study mainly consists of young women, around 53% in the age group 25 to 35 years age, 35% between 35 years of age, and 11% around 18 to 25. So most of them were married, around 68%, home workers, and had a graduate degree. It was interesting to find that 58% belonged to the rural population and 41% belonged to the urban population. So using the HAM-D scale for assessment of depression, 16% had mild, 18% had moderate depression, 31% had severe, and 33% had severe depression. So for the ease of data calculation, we divided the mild and the moderate group of depression as one category and severe and very severe as one category. Using ASEC scale, we were able to get the prevalence of sexual dysfunction as 80%. Further, using FSFI score, which was most sensitive in picking up sexual dysfunction, which was around 82.3. Also using FSFI score, we were also able to establish the type of sexual dysfunction. So arousal was the highest, around 33, and followed by lubrication and orgasms. Next slide, please. So as we see, we observe that women with moderate to very severe depression reported high levels of reduced desire, whereas women in the mild to moderate depression reported dysfunction in the pain domain. So on comparing the two HAM-D categories with domains of sexual dysfunction using FSFI and ASEX, we were able to establish a statistical significant association in domains of desire, arousal, orgasm, and pain, whereas ASEX only reported in desire. Thus, FSFI was not only sensitive in picking up a higher prevalence, but also established sexual dysfunction in multiple domains. Next slide, please. So I would like to conclude that the prevalence of sexual dysfunction in women with depression before treatment initiation is quite high. Although, so it is very, very important that physicians and psychiatrists explore about the sexual history as early as first depressive episode. A lot of research has been done about sexual dysfunction due to medicine, but our study shows that sexual dysfunction is prevalent as early as your first depressive episode. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And you are open to ask me questions, and that's my email ID.
Hi. So what problem facing you while you conducting your questionnaires or data?
Sorry, can you tell me your question again?
What problem you face when you collecting your data or your work?
Sure. So initially, it was very difficult to have women talk about their sexual history. So we would have to actually ask husband for their permission. And eventually, as and when I was taking their history of depression, they slowly opened up. And then they finally understood that, especially pain, a lot of women reported that they were having pain while having intercourse. And they could not understand that this was because they were depressed. So eventually, when they were educated about this, they felt more open and they helped us with a questionnaire.
Dr. Singh, I have a question.
Yes.
So according to your research results, it was more of psychological reasons than being the medical effects, right?
Yes, so my thing was to understand that sexual dysfunction could be psychological and as early as without giving a drug treatment. So it was very important to pick it up as early as possible, as the results show.
Okay, so how did you move through with it? Like if you found a depression in patients without before starting a treatment, would you still commence the treatment for this patient, or what would you do with it?
So initially, first the focus was to treat the depression and not the sexual dysfunction. And a lot of women showed their improvement as soon as the depression was treated when I followed them up.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Kangsha. Do we have Zainab here? Zainab, can we test your mic? Zainab, I can't still hear you. Yes, you may, Zainab. I can take you last, no worries. Okay, the next presentation is Arwa Nogdala.
Sir, Arva or Omer might not be here today. We can move it to Diksha, I guess.
All good. Over to you, Diksha.
Hello everyone, this is Diksha Mahindru, a medical student from a medical graduate from India. I would like to thank GRRSP for this opportunity. Could I request you to please magnify the screen a bit? It's not clearly visible, the poster. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Dr. Zara. I'm here to present a case report. The title of the case report is Vitamin D Dependent Rickets with Alopecia, a Rare Case Report. Introduction. As we all know, that rickets is a metabolic bone disorder that develops as a result of decreased mineralization on the growth plate in infant, child, adult, and which can be due to two causes. That could be due to nutritional deficiency or due to hereditary causes. A very interesting fact is that of all the cases of rickets that exist worldwide, only 13% of cases are due to hereditary causes, which can be further divided broadly into two categories, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is further classified into vitamin D dependent rickets type 1A and type 1B. Type 1 is due to deficiency of enzymes which are required for the conversion of vitamin D into its active form, calcitriol, which is the metabolically active form of vitamin D that is required for performing functions in our body. And now let's talk about type 2, which is further divided into VDDR type 2A and type 2B, which occurs as a result of mutations in the vitamin D receptor, which leads to resistance to vitamin D. A mutation in the vitamin D receptor gene, which is located on chromosome 12q, 12q14, results in the rare autosomal recessive condition known as vitamin D dependent rickets type 2A. Our case report has the case of VDDR type 2A. Due to defective receptor, formation of hormone receptor complex doesn't take place in body, hence preventing the action of calcitriol. Clinically, it manifests as growth retardation starting in early childhood and is commonly accompanied by alopecia totalis, enamel abnormalities, and skeletal malformations. Now let's talk about the case presentation. Could you please, thank you, Dr. Zara. A 10-year-old child was seen in the dermatology outpatient clinic of a tertiary care hospital with hair loss on his scalp and torso, which was first seen 1 month after birth, as per the history told to us by the parents of the child. At the age of 2, walking difficulties were also noticed in the child. Additionally, noticeable findings were widening of the wrist, distal radius and ulna, and increasing lateral bowing of the femur and tibia. There was evidence of ankle widening as well, which is also known as double malleolized sign. The typical physiological bending of the legs, tenu valgum, was abnormally accentuated. As you can see in the images, alopecia is clearly present on the scalp of the patient as well as on the eyebrows of the patient. The patient had no eyebrows or eyelids. You can see bowing of legs, commonly known as tenu valgum or knock knees. You can see hypoplastic interior teeth due to abnormalities in the dental enamel, and you can see the widened wrist and rickety rosary sign. Due to presence of the similar clinical features in the younger sibling of the patient as well, a decision was taken to conduct a genetic analysis in the patient. According to the genetic analysis report, a pathogenic homozygous 5' splice site variant was discovered in intron 4 of the VDR gene on the chromosome 12, which confirmed the diagnosis of VDDR type 2A in this patient. Other lab investigations which were conducted were vitamin D3 levels, which was 17, which are insufficient since the normal levels are above 30. Phosphorus levels were 4.2, which was normal. ALP levels were 1,976, which were highly increased. Calcium levels were significantly low, and the child had hypocalcemia. PTH levels were 731, which was also highly increased. After confirming the diagnosis, we started calcium and vitamin D supplements in this child, and the child was clinically followed up by conducting lab investigations twice every month, and the clinical improvement was seen in the clinical symptoms as well as on lab reports. So what makes this case report unique? This case report is unique because it concerns a VDDR2A case that is alopecia. This type of vitamin D receptor mutation and the amount of remaining vitamin D receptor activity influences how the disease manifests clinically. Alopecia, which is sign of illness severity and is present in roughly 2/3 of cases of vitamin D, VDDR type 2A, is a distinctive hallmark of the condition. Treatment of VDDR includes therapeutic trial of calcitriol and calcium supplementation. Therapy is started at daily doses of 2 microgram of calcitriol and 100 milligram of calcium. Administration of extremely high doses, depending on the clinical disease severity, may be required of calcitriol up to 30 to 60 microgram per day and calcium up to 3 gram per day. During treatment, patients should initially be evaluated at least once per week, but there is a serious lapse of follow-up seen in Indian settings, leading to a care gap and unmet needs in the community. Serious serum calcium, phosphorus, ALP, creatinine, calcitriol level, vitamin D level, PTH concentration, and the urinary calcium creatinine ratios should be measured for the follow-up of the patient. Failure of therapy should be considered if no biochemical response occurs after 3 to 5 months of regular treatment. Now, to conclude, the most frequent cause of rickets is vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D dependent rickets, which is genetic in nature, is another extremely uncommon variant of the disease. To improve the quality of life for those who have this kind of rickets, early identification and treatment are very crucial. Early diagnosis is aided by knowledge of clinical characteristics, research, and genetic testing, which is very important for the diagnosis of the disease. Here we describe a case of two siblings who had vitamin D-dependent rickets. Genetic testing revealed a pathogenic variant in the homozygous 5' splice location in intron 4 of the VDR gene on chromosome 12. Our case highlights the challenges of early detection and treatment of vitamin D-dependent rickets, while also highlighting the importance of prompt diagnosis and treatment to improve the disease prognosis. Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, you can please ask.
Yeah, Diksha. So I have some two questions, small questions. So basically, my thanks for the case report. This is really a very interesting case report. So one first question is, when the patient has presented with some hair loss, and initial presentation was hair loss. So in terms of, you said that after a treatment, the clinical improvements was noticed. So what clinical improvements you noticed, and whether he did have this, I mean, hair growth or not? So is there any improvement in the hair growth or?
This is a very interesting question. The case came to us in 2019, and by 2022, we had there was some hair growth seen on the scalp of the patient, as well as there was clinical improvement in all other clinical symptoms of the patient. Example, the bowing of legs was less, and the patient was able to walk better, and the bone pain was not there, and the widened wrist, the diameter of the widened wrist decreased, and the hair growth was there. Though it was very sparse, but it was still present. And a very rigorous and regular treatment is required, but the hair growth will never be complete because the disease severity depends on what receptor activity is still left in the body. So
okay, the second question is, sure. Thank you. So the second quick question is, what would be your recommendation for other people, other physicians, where the genetic test is not available, because it may be costly and it may not be widely available? So what is your recommendation for them?
Yeah, you're exactly right that the genetic analysis is very costly, and looking at the economic status of the patient in India, especially, it is very tough for everyone to do genetic tests. But in fact, in this case, the thing which prompted us to do genetic analysis was that both the siblings had similar symptoms, and it is an autosomal recessive condition, so the parents did not have any symptoms. But since both the siblings had similar symptoms, even if we did not do the genetic test, the treatment protocol would have remained same, that giving calcium and vitamin D and calcitriol supplementation. So if we are not able to do genetic test, even the treatment protocol would not that be affected. But conducting genetic test is necessary because on one hand, we need to have a confirmed diagnosis. But if somebody cannot afford that, we can use our clinical sense, and then we can start the treatment, because that's not harmful. And after a few months, if we see improvement in clinical symptoms and lab reports, we can know that we're giving the correct treatment. And so genetic analysis was not required. It's fine. I hope I'm able to clear all your doubts.
Thank you. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
GRRSP,
Diksha,
for this great opportunity.
Thank you, Diksha. I'll be taking 4 names. And if any of these presenters is here available right now, we'll take them next and then move on to the next section of the Congress. First is Zainab Mohammed. Zainab, do we have you now? Then is Umar Abdullah Muhammad, Arwa Nogdala, and Rua Taha. All right. For the previous presentations that have just happened, if any questions remain, please do leave them in the chat as we take a 10 minutes break and come back to you with the panel discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Zara, Zainab just joined. See if she can share her.
Zainab, do we have you?
Break it is.
Zainab, if you're here, please do open your mic.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me? Okay,
Yes,
I turned to my iPhone. If that's not a problem
okay
with you.
No worries at all. We can hear you. That's good. I'll bring up your presentation.
Okay, that's great.
Can you see my screen, Dana?
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect.
Okay.
You will have 5 minutes to present.
Okay, sorry for the inconvenience. My name is Zainab Mohammed. I'm a medical student. I'm a 6th-year medical student in Sudan. I'm going to start with the introduction before the actual introduction. As many of you may not know Sudan, Sudan is a third world country in Africa, which we recently had revolution 2019, and now we're in state of war because it didn't work out great. So this can give you an understanding to the health sector in Sudan and how it's going right now. Okay, Sudan faces significant healthcare problems because there's challenges to provide. Okay, go to the next slide, sorry. I'm not used to this iPhone, yes. Providing adequate healthcare services for all its population, and especially for people in the rural areas because they lack the infrastructure and well-trained medical staff. And they do have low health education and awareness, which leads to social injustice because people in the rural areas can't get the same health care as people in cities. So in Al Toldo village, this is the rural area that we went to, we wanted to assess the health problems such as endemic diseases and chronic. And we found that they also had contaminated water sources and poor accessibility to health centers and hospitals. So we did this study to assess their level of health education, their accessibility and health problems. As reported by their community leaders, so that we can improve health sector there and make the community more involved in healthcare. You can go to the next slide. Next, if you can hear me. Okay, yes. So this is no, for the method slide. Yes, thank you. This is community-based qualitative study. We involved 5 focus group, 2 from the schools, boys and girls school, and from religious leaders, and the hospital staff, and the last one from the community population. We recorded the interviews in a recording device. The interview was sample-based, and it was based on the WHO Community Health Need Assessment. And we then we analyzed them thematically using Atlas TI9. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Okay, it's going to be better if we go to the other slide. because because this is more people will be more able to understand it. So we found health problems there. Mainly endemic diseases were malaria, and we found chronic disease and water contaminated based disease such as diarrhea, poisoning, and also UTI due to water being salty and chalky, and it's contaminated. And for the health accessibility, transportation was a big problem there, especially in the fall season, because the road gets muddy and they don't have the right transportation method that can travel these roads. And financial, there was actually a disagreement between two. The health personnel said that they don't face a problem, the patients don't face problem financially, because even if you don't have the money for the treatment, other people will pay for you, or you just they will just give you the treatment even if you didn't pay and you didn't find anyone to pay you. But people from the GRRSP schools said that financial money is a big problem, because not everyone can approach medical treatment. And so they just cancel it all at once because they can't pay that. I think this is probably because miscommunication between the health staff and the community. And for political issues, as I said, Sudan is politically unstable, and we are all aware that when a country is unstable, this would directly affect the health sector in that country. For trusted sources of health education, most of the participants agreed that we will take their advices from health professionals. And second to that, they go to the religious leader. But we found a switch there regarding mental illness, as people say they only go to religious leader. They don't believe that they have mental disease. They say we only have crazy and possessed people, possessed by the devil. They don't, not everyone aware of mental disease in that way. And for the challenges in health system, we found that there's a shortage of medical professionals, because people tend to go to these big cities for work, and they don't like to work in rural areas. And there's a lack of trained personnel such as nurses and etc. Also lab technician. For community solutions suggested, the medical staff said that prevention is better than cure, and this is what they're working towards, to have preventative methods they can implement in the community. And they want to improve the healthcare infrastructure, such as roads, and they want to have an ambulance that can travel muddy roads and such. And they also found that organizing health education programs really did an amazing job in teaching people. So they want to further organize more educational programs for their community. Okay, you can go for the next slide. Yeah, for conclusion, people in rural areas usually face social injustice and inequality, because the main focus for the health system is for the big cities and for these big hospitals, and no one really interested in going and serving people in the rural areas. And by this, we're jeopardizing the equity and social justice of our country. So this is a really important problem that we can easily tackle and treat. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Thank you so much.
I hope you did hear me good.
Yes, you're very audible.
Again, I'm sorry for the inconvenience with the laptop.
No problem.
Thank you for bearing with me.
So I just have one question with regard to generalizability. How would you address generalizability in this particular study?
In this study, actually, you mean for all of Sudan, all of the rural areas in Sudan?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Actually, we found other studies. I can forward you the manuscript of our study. There was other study in rural areas. They had the same problem, you know, because Sudan actually is a third world country, is very poor, and even in the big cities, the health system is not good. And you find in other research, not only in Al-Tundub, in other villages, they found that the same result, that there is no accessibility because the salaries of the doctor is very bad. People don't tend to go to rural areas. They want to have private clinics in the city, in the big city, so they can, you know, they have a good living. And so we found that other study also have the same result as we did. If you are interested, I can forward you the manuscript.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zainab.
Okay, thank
So
you.
as our judges compile the results in the background, we'll take a 3 to 5 minutes break and be back here at 10 with the panel discussion, which will be moderated by Dr. Rahul Kashyap. And we'd like to request all of you to close your cameras and your mics while the panel discussion is going on, and then keep submitting your questions through the chat box as well as in the question and answer session at the end. See you all in a bit.